want to hear about these motherfuckers. It's time to go. All I want to do is fucking eat.
We're not practicing to beat somebody. We're practicing to beat everybody.
Nowhere to run and nowhere to hide for 4 quarters. They got to see us in our house for 4 quarters. They got to look us in the eye for 4. This is about us and our family and our house. This is about us. This is our mentality. We ain't backing down. We ain't running. Set a tone, send a message. This is our house. Physical toughness wins in football now. And if you in this room, you got it. And if you come in here, you better believe in it. Because this physical toughness, it's what makes the difference. Elite focus. That's all I do. The guy across from me, I'm fixing to whip his ass. Not in my box, not today. It's about us. It's about our family. We attack. You take that helmet and you strike them. And you strike them and you strike them. That's how you get respect.
Now I am going to pick shit out of them. Physically, I want to break them.
All right, everybody. Welcome back into this week's edition of How About That Dogs Cast. We are in the middle of whirlwind season. At least that's how I feel. Because obviously, we just had a big weekend. Dogs playing in the SEC championship game. And then the next day, the final rankings come out. So now we are figuring out which bowl game we're going to be in. Are they in the playoff? So on and so forth. For the coaches, for the players, right on the heels of that, you have the transfer portal opening up. And then what feels like a flood of athletes across the country deciding that they're going to join in. Cast their lot with another team, take their chances. And there's award season news. There's starting to sort of look at the logistics of what the bowl game might look like later this month. And all the while, recruiting is continuing. And we're starting to think about, what is the team going to look like in the bowl game? Who's going to play? Who's going to not play? Who's going to opt for the NFL? And if we needed one more thing to think about, we knew that the schedule for the SEC was going to be released here in a few days. But our good friends over at UGAsports.com confirmed this afternoon what that schedule was going to be. And they went ahead and made that information public this afternoon. So we're going to take a look at that as well. There is so much going on right now that if you're not paying attention, you are just simply going to miss some stuff. And that is really part of the reason I'm happy that you guys are here with me this evening, because this show is jam-packed with information. Let's just start at the beginning. Obviously, the game in Atlanta against Alabama this past weekend did not go the way we all hoped it would. I sat right here last week and said that I felt Georgia was the better team. But on Saturday, they didn't play like it. And at the end of the day, that's what happened. Georgia didn't play well enough to win that game on Saturday. Alabama is the conference champion, and congratulations to them. Georgia's lot for the rest of this year has been cast, according to the College Football Playoff Committee, with Florida State in the Orange Bowl. Now, I don't know how you feel about this game. I, for one, have a myriad of reasons to be excited about this game, this matchup, what we're going to see, and how it's all going to play out. I think that's rooted in the kind of college football fan that I am. For me, I grew up a Georgia Bulldogs fan. I chose to attend the University of Georgia. I got my degree from the University of Georgia. And I root for the University of Georgia and the Power G in all that it represents. So to me, it doesn't matter which game you're in. It doesn't matter who chooses to play or who doesn't. I'm going to root for my team. And I feel really good about that. it provides me with so many options about why I can be excited about the next time I'm going to get to see the Georgia Bulldogs play a football game. This week, though, I've seen a lot of people have a lot to say about why this game is meaningless or why it doesn't matter. And the simple fact to that statement, the obvious retort, is that you're simply incorrect. That's the bottom line. There are so many practices, so many players that are going to be able to take advantage of those practices. Because in the world that we are in now in college football, again, with the transfer portal and simply roster management on a larger scale because of players opting for the NFL and so on. If you do not make a bowl game and do not take advantage of those extra 15, 16 practices, you are selling yourself and your program short. Trust me when I tell you that no one in Athens views this game as meaningless. Nobody. If you are all high on that horse and you think that for some reason you want to argue that it is, I invite you to take yourself over to Butts-Mehre and ask KIRBY if it's meaningless. Ask those players who have dedicated their lives to the sport whether or not it's meaningless. I think we all know what the answer would be. And if you went in there saying it with your whole chest, well, that just might be a bad idea. Just an observation from somebody who's seen a little bit and watched a few of those things unfold. I'm just letting you know. But people who are not invested in the team in any real way, well, I guess they're free to say whatever they want. But at the same time, I hear what you say. So I'm not going to view you as a serious Georgia Bulldog fan if you're running around saying that. I'm just not. Because I know what the reality is. What I would view you as is someone that is a convenient front runner. You want to pay attention as long as everybody's winning. But the minute they're not, you can't be bothered. And that's fine. If that's who you are, just embrace it. Actually, I followed up these thoughts this week on social media, which is always a dangerous venture. But I put out the information, like my perspective, because now that means that there are an entire group of people out there that I don't have to listen to this offseason moan and wail and whine and pine about how they cannot wait for college football to come back, how college football is the greatest sport on the planet, how they can't wait to be back in Athens to see the dogs between the hedges. No, I don't have to hear from them because they've spent the last part of this week telling me that this game doesn't matter that's coming up at the end of the month. Telling me that they're only fans when things are going good, right? They're not truly invested. So I'm certain I won't be hearing from those people all offseason about how much they love college football, because they don't. What they love are like 3 games a year, not college football as a whole, at least not the way I do. Everybody's entitled to be the kind of fan they want to be. But just understand that when you say things like that or, pitch a fit about just something ignorant that's easily disproven, there are other Bulldog fans in Dog Nation who listen to you. We see you. We read your stuff. And we just know that you're not a serious person and that we should not be paying attention to anything you have to say when it comes to the Georgia football team. So, as I step down off of that soapbox, this whole show tonight is going to be really about a review of what we saw in 2023. And thanks to the schedule reveal, we're going to get to look ahead to 2024. So I'm going to share a few thoughts about that. And let's just start with the committee, right? I mean, they're the ones who kicked all of this thing off for us. This is what's dictating our future. As you can see, the final rankings came in as Michigan 1, Washington 2, Texas at 3, Alabama at 4. That put Florida State at 5 as an undefeated Power 5 conference champion, and our Georgia Bulldogs at 6, which how you are the number 1 team all season and then slide all the way to 6, I just don't understand. I can't wrap my head around that one. And from what I've gathered, most other people can't as well. But it's like I've said a lot this week. I don't spend any time, like none, and I really try to not devote any time to it here on the channel, focused on what the College Football Playoff Committee is going to do. And I say that only because, and I mean, obviously I care about the rankings, but I'm not going to dive into it and argue with you over who should be, 5, 6, whatever. Because at the end of the day, the one thing that we've seen from this committee over the past 10 years is that they turn the rules to fit the situation. They make it up as they go. So I'm not going to have a whole lot of anxiety or give myself a stress headache over trying to figure out why they do what they do. At the end of the day, Georgia didn't play well enough to win that game, matching a season high in penalties, turning the football over, things like that. And therefore they gave up control of their situation to this committee, and we see what happened. I say that really just speaking on the committee. Again, I'm not going to stress out over it. Georgia did their best. The game shook out the way it did. And now I get to turn my attention to what's next, which is an opportunity to watch the Dogs play in the Orange Bowl against the Florida State Seminoles. Now, again, this is a game that I find to be very, very interesting for a lot of reasons. One, I'm old enough. I'm a Gen X guy. So I am old enough to remember the night before the game, or in my memory, it's the night before the game, because I was small, like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. And I remember watching the Orange Bowl parade and the Sugar Bowl parade on the days leading up to those games, and just being a college football fan thinking, oh man, how cool is this? I was a young kid. I loved the parade. It was awesome. And King Orange would come out and it would be great. So I have fond memories of the Orange Bowl. And when Georgia went to the Orange Bowl back in 21, January, or was it January? Or was it New Year's? It was New Year's Eve. So it wasn't yet 21. It was still, or it was 21. It wasn't yet 22. So New Year's Eve 21, Georgia plays Michigan in the Orange Bowl. And I didn't even get to watch that game live. And I don't feel bad about that, because I was with my family ringing in the new year in front of the castle at Disney World. A fantastic night, fantastic memories. My children had a blast. We all had a blast. It was a great time. While I was there, I was getting updates on how the game was going, though, and that added to our enjoyment of the evening, right? I was able to see the Dogs are winning and still go have a good time, but I didn't get to watch the game. And the football fan in me felt a little robbed by that. So the fact that the Dogs are going back, I am somebody who's happy about that, because I get to watch this version of Georgia play in the Orange Bowl, a bowl that I enjoyed, well, essentially my entire life. So that's just the surface level fandom of it all. When you start to look at the game and who the teams are and what's at stake and how they wound up here, there's intrigue built into this game around, are the teams going to feel slighted? Are they going to be angry? How much of that emotion is going to factor into the game? Florida State wants to try to prove a point, but I think Kirby Smart and the Bulldogs want to try to prove a point as well. They want to try to prove who they are, who they were all year. I think that Kirby learned his lesson in 2019 in the Sugar Bowl against Texas with all the opt-outs, still allowing those guys to go on those trips and be around the team. It kind of sucked the energy out of them. So I think Kirby learned a lot about that too. I think the way he's going to handle this team this year is going to be drastically different than what they did in the run-up to the Sugar Bowl a few years back. And when I look at Florida State, the Florida State team has a defense that is, without question, playoff caliber. They are very, very good. And I'm very interested to see, assuming, at this point I have to assume, that Carson Beck is going to be the quarterback and there are going to be players at his disposal because we haven't heard anything different. It's going to be very interesting to see this Georgia offense against what is, without a doubt, a top-tier defense in this game. So that is going to be something to look forward to as well from my perspective. There are, going back for just a second to that roster management piece and how Kirby's going to handle this differently than he handled that Sugar Bowl a few years back. I mean, he's already said it in the very opening statement. Well, not the opening statement, but in his very first Orange Bowl interview, presser availability with Mike Norvell, he touched on the fact, he's like, listen, they may be ticked off down there. We're ticked off up here too. And I don't know who my team's going to be exactly, but I'm looking forward to finding out. Because he, and I'm paraphrasing a little here, but he said, what we're going to see is a lot of guys playing in positions in this game that we were planning on them playing next year. So as a Georgia Bulldog fan, I get a peek behind the curtain at a group of players that I'm not overly familiar with, and I'm going to get to see what the future of my team is going to look like. And to me, that is very exciting. Very exciting. And the roster management piece, the transfer portal is open, but anybody who follows recruiting, even though National Signing Day is just a few days away, knows that recruiting for the major programs has been done for the last 3 or 4 months. I mean, there's been a flip here. People are staying in touch with others, but it's done. This class has been locked up for months. Most of these guys, thanks to the new recruiting calendar, are opting to be mid-year players, which means they're going to come in, join the team, get these practices to put themselves in position to both, one, figure out what college football is all about at the University of Georgia, get their feet wet, so that when spring practice does get here, they're not going to have a learning curve. They're going to be up to speed. But when you have this many mid-years coming in and so many people moving across your roster, the opportunity to go and practice against what was the number 1 team in the country for most of the year is like, you cannot put a value on it. And if you don't believe me, just look at Georgia's roster this year when they lined up to play in the SEC championship game. There were at least 4, maybe 5 guys that were mid-year players who started in the SEC championship game for Georgia this year. And how were they able to do that? It was because they were early enrollee guys, mid-year guys that were at the bowl practices and had an understanding and laid the groundwork for what was going to come in the spring and then in fall camp to get ready for this season. That is just something you cannot put a price on. And if you think that this time with these players is not valuable, literally worth its weight in a gold-plated CFP trophy, I really don't know what else to tell you. These opportunities are so valuable. And I'm looking forward to seeing what Coach can do to get them ready and what they can show us, not the mid-year guys, but the guys that are already on the team, the young players that we haven't seen a lot of. I hope we get to see a lot of them because that's going to let us know a lot about what's going to happen in 24, which we will get to a little bit more in depth here in a minute. But let's keep this moving. Speaking of the College Football Playoff Committee, let's take a look at what Kirby Smart has done during his time in Athens with regards to the College Football Playoff Committee. For people who are watching the podcast, you'll see that in 2017, the Dogs went to the Rose Bowl, then played in the national championship game. 2018, Sugar Bowl. 2019, Sugar Bowl. 2020, back in the Peach Bowl. That game launched into 2021, which was the trip to the Orange Bowl I was just talking about, and another appearance in the national championship game where the Dogs won the title. And then in 22, the Peach Bowl against Ohio State, all-time classic victory, put the Dogs in the national championship game, all-time obliteration of an opponent where the Dogs won their second consecutive national championship. And then here in 23, the Dogs find themselves once again in a New Year's Day or New Year's Six bowl game back in the Orange Bowl. It doesn't matter how you want to look at this, how you want to turn the Rubik's Cube, okay? The fact that, with the exception of one season, his first in Athens, Kirby Smart has put Georgia football right in the thick of the College Football Playoff Committee discussion. Twice winning the national championship, 3 times playing for it, and always in the conversation. I don't know. This is a brass tacks bottom line kind of sport. You only get to play a handful of games, and everyone matters. And to go out there and consistently win the way Georgia has won under Kirby Smart is impressive. No one can argue otherwise. And keep in mind that each one of these games that we're looking at here on the screen, 17 through 23, are late in December or early in January games. That brings us right back to all of that extended practice time. It brings us right back to all that extra time being in the system, being in the program, and it serves as that vaulting board to launch you into the next season. So, people can say whatever they want, especially from opposing fan bases, but the bottom line is the man in Athens is getting it done at a clip that college football has not seen. And knock on wood, if everything keeps rolling and everybody stays healthy, primarily Kirby Smart and his staff and everything else, there's no reason to think that he's not going to continue to adjust to college football's shifting landscape and keep Georgia football in this conversation for the foreseeable future, especially when we know that there's a larger playoff coming just next year. So, if you need more of a reason to be excited, think about those numbers for a little while, and you're going to go to sleep tonight with a smile on your face. Now, how did the Dogs have the kind of season that put them back in position to be considered for the college football playoff and ultimately landed them in the Orange Bowl this year against Florida State? Well, the bottom line is it's because of great players and great coaching. So as we take a look and run back through what has happened this season that has allowed Georgia to be here, if these things have slipped past you in the past, I hope you'll make note, because it's something to be appreciated. And if you're a fan of college football, it's something to be admired. And there's a long list here, so y'all bear with me. We're going to roll through them. But look at Brock Bowers. Everybody's All-American, number 19, was a finalist for the Lombardi Award this year. Ladd McConkey, a finalist for the Wuerffel Trophy, which is a trophy that is given to a collegiate player who gives back to his community. It speaks to not only is Georgia producing top-tier players on the football field, They are made up of top-tier human beings that make their presence felt in the community. And if we needed even more of an example that is true, just turn your eyes to the NFL at what happened this week, with Jonathan Ledbetter being named the Walter Payton Man of the Year in the NFL and Roquan Smith being honored as well, both former Bulldogs. Anywhere you look where people have the power G, you have an opportunity to be proud of our university. I mentioned the coaches. Mike Bobo didn't win it, but he was a finalist for the Broyles Award, which is given to the best assistant coach in the country in any given year. And with everything that was said in the offseason, at the end of the day, the numbers are what they are. The results are what they are. And Mike Bobo absolutely deserved consideration for this award. I, for one, was very happy to see that nationally he was receiving the sort of attention and congratulations that he should receive, even though he didn't always receive it from his own fan base. Carson Beck, the man at the helm for Georgia this year, was a Manning Award finalist. Now, Carson was on a couple of other different watch lists where he made it to the semifinalist round. But Carson was another person that was questioned all during the offseason, and all he did was come out, play a fantastic record-setting season for the University of Georgia, and put them in position to make it to the college football playoff again. At this point, we don't know Carson's future as to whether or not he's coming back. I think he will. I think all signs point to that fact, but we won't know until we know. But either way, I'm thankful for what Carson Beck did for Georgia this year, and I'm happy to see that he's being recognized as one of the top quarterbacks in the country. Malachi Starks was a Jim Thorpe finalist this year, and Malachi is somebody else whose name popped up on a bunch of different award lists this year. But even to make it to this round, and trust me, I'm a voter for several of these awards, it's quite the task when you see the lists of fantastic football players that are in front of you that you have to choose from to whittle down to get to the level of finalist. It really does make you pause and understand just what an honor it is to make it this far, to be counted as a finalist. Here's Brock again, number 19, a finalist for the John Mackey Award, which he won last year. Given his injuries, it's going to be interesting what they do with this award. I, for one, absolutely would give my vote to Brock Bowers if I had it. I don't have a vote on this one. But the Mackey Award is a tremendous award, and he would become the first back-to-back winner of the Mackey Award at the University of Georgia. And that's just one more rose to throw on the pile of ways we could laud this young man and his contributions to Georgia football over the years. And here's Malachi again as a finalist for the Bronco Nagurski Award. Now, this, I don't know why, I've just always loved the name of this award. Like, I love Bronco Nagurski. Like, if you're a historian of football, you know who that is. And just saying his name makes me smile, like when I think about this award. So the fact that Malachi has made it this far and is again being touted as a finalist for this award is something to be appreciated by all of us Georgia fans. The Joe Moore Award has recognized the University of Georgia offensive line yet again as naming them a finalist for their prestigious trophy. The finalists this year do not include the winners from the last 2 years, which is the offensive line from the University of Michigan. Hopefully, this is the year that the Georgia offensive line is recognized as the top offensive line in the country. We will see. I thought for certain they were going to win it last year. Somehow they did not. So I will not count my chickens before they hatch on this one. But yet again, the Georgia offensive line is right there, which again speaks to the coaching and player development, especially of these young men. and I'm happy to see them receive this honor. When you talk about all league teams, so all SEC type teams, the Dogs, very, very well represented. They didn't claim the trophy in the championship game. But when you look here, you see that there are 7 Bulldogs that made it on the second team. And if we move on down, you'll notice that there were 4 more that made it to the first team. That's Tate Ratledge, Malachi Starks, Brock Bowers, and my guy SVP. Any way you slice it, Georgia was as talented as anybody in the country this year. Unfortunately, the SEC eluded them. But that's why you want to go out and finish this year the right way with a championship and a trophy game. So congratulations to all these young men who made the All-SEC team. And then just yesterday, I believe it was, the All-American team for CBS Sports was named. And Tyke Smith made the team, SVP, Brock Bowers, everybody's All-American, and of course Malachi Starks made it as first-team members. I made it as All-American members, 2 on the first team and 2 on the second team. So that is how you get to 12-0 and another appearance in the SEC championship game to have a chance to raise the trophy. Great players under the tutelage of great coaches. There are a lot of ways that we could go about dissecting what's yet to come. But one of the things that I think we have to get to, and I wrestled with how to do this. I'm like, do we actually review 2023 first, or do we take a look at the breaking news, which was 2024, with a schedule revealed today? Ultimately, I decided to review the last year first, but let's go ahead and get into 2024. Y'all excuse me while I take a drink of water. So here's the big news. Now we know not only who the Dogs are going to play, we knew that already, but now we know when. So let your eyes roll over the schedule if you haven't already had a chance to take a look at it and just come up with your initial thoughts. And please feel free to share them in the chat or in the comments below what you think about the upcoming season. Do you think Georgia got hosed? Do you think it's a tough schedule? Do you think it lays out well for the Dogs? Let's walk through it and maybe come to a bit of an agreement about it if we can. This year, everybody wanted to dunk on the Dogs during the offseason because of the schedule. And ultimately, the fact that Oklahoma was removed from the schedule by the SEC, well, that probably hurt Georgia when it came down to the argument about who was going to actually make it into the CFP here at the end. But all that's water under the bridge. When we look to 2024, nobody's going to be saying anything like that about Georgia or their schedule. Just take a look at how they opened the season against Clemson in Atlanta in, I think what they're calling it now is the Aflac kickoff game. It's always fun to take on Clemson. That is a traditional game for the University of Georgia, and the blood will be running hot when we get there. There's going to be plenty to talk about in the lead up to that game over the course of the summer. There's going to be news everywhere. These two teams recruit against each other consistently. This one is going to be a wonderful way to kick off the 2024 season. And we're going to learn a lot about who Georgia is by the time this game is over. Because there's an opportunity for a lot of things to change on Georgia's roster heading into that game. I mean, if we start at the top, it could be as simple as they have a new quarterback. They have to rebuild the offensive line. They have to find new weapons on the outside. They have to rebuild the defensive line. There are a lot of moving parts for Georgia in this offseason, and it's going to be an exciting one that's packed with news. I'm certain it's going to keep me busier than I ever thought I would be in the offseason. But this Clemson game is a wonderful thing to point to as a fan to get ready for the 2024 year. We know that Clemson has been going through some things, as it were, but there's no doubt they're going to be ready to play this one. Tennessee Tech the next week. I mean, that one is what it is, but it's going to be a home game. So the Dogs are going to open up at a neutral site, then come home to play Tennessee Tech. Then they go on the road to play Kentucky in September. That's going to be a little weird, right? Because as far back as I can remember, they've played Kentucky down later in the season, but not in 24. They're going to head up there early, and most likely they're going to face their old teammate, Brock Vandegrift, under center for the Wildcats, as Brock has already jumped into the transfer portal and found a new home. So that one has storylines all over it, and it is going to be very, very interesting to see what happens on the Bluegrass while we're still in September. Then the Dogs have a very well-positioned bye. So right there off the jump, we already are going to learn what the Dogs are like on the road. We're going to get to see them at home, and we're going to get to see some young players in new places. The month of September is going to be very, very exciting on this schedule. And then you look at the end of the month, we come off that bye, Alabama's there. And the Dogs have to travel to Tuscaloosa to play that game. Now, if you want to argue that Georgia gets the hose yet again, having to go back to Tuscaloosa after just going in 2020, okay, argue whatever you want. We've got months to talk about it. But any way you look at it, the season gets serious in a hurry for Georgia right here. So they're at Tuscaloosa on the 28th of September. Then we roll into Auburn, or rather, Auburn comes to us, but we roll into that game in October. Auburn should be a better football team next year than they are right now. And we all know what it's like to play Auburn. It's always a challenging game. So you have on the road at Alabama, then you come home to play Auburn. That's pretty tough any way you want to shake it. Then Mississippi State comes to Athens. And Mississippi State wasn't very good this year, but they have a new coach. So we're going to learn some stuff about Mississippi State pretty early. So that one's going to be interesting. I'm not going to call it a breather, but when you look at the month of October, the Mississippi State game is the one where you might pop your head up and say, whew, we're not like getting browbeat this week. Then the Dogs get back on the road to go out to Austin, which, again, I understand people are coming in and schedules have to go where they have to go, but nobody did Georgia any favors here. So if you look at that, stretch, Alabama, Auburn, Mississippi State, and then Texas, you're going to be hard-pressed to find a more difficult month for anybody across the country, especially here in the SEC. And then they close out October with a bye week, and I guess we can say a traditional bye week ahead of Florida before they go down to Jacksonville. Now, who knows what Florida is going to be next year, but that game is always what it is. And then you go from a neutral site game in Jacksonville on the road to the Grove to play Ole Miss, which, I mean, clearly that was a pretty good team this year. They're going to have a lot of those pieces back next year, and certainly they're going to add some more to it. So that could be a challenging game for the Dogs on the road there in November. Then the Dogs come back home to welcome in the Tennessee Volunteers. I don't know if I'm going to sit here today and say that Ole Miss and Tennessee are both ranked at this point in the season, but it is certainly possible. Then you've got UMass before we take on Georgia Tech at the end of the year between the hedges. So when I look at this schedule, top to bottom, I kind of laid it out as we went through it there. And again, I appreciate y'all hanging with me here as my throat is acting up with me. But that game to open the season against Clemson is one that I find very interesting. I'm really excited about that one. The Kentucky game is going to be interested simply because of Vandegrift and what's going on there. But when you look at September, Alabama, Auburn, Mississippi State, and Texas, that run right there, even if the Dogs manage to say split against Alabama and Texas in those two games that month, and then you manage to win out the rest of your games, you're going to be in pretty good shape. And I mean, at this point, we have to assume that Milroe is going to be back for Alabama. So let's just assume they're going to be right there at the top of the league with Georgia, and you might get a rematch with Alabama there. And then given the way we're headed into the 12-team playoff and the way seedings could go, it's very, very possible that Georgia could play Alabama 3 times in 2024, which is kind of crazy when you stop to think about it. It's all going to be very interesting, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it's going to shake out. But I don't have any problem at all saying that this is obviously a tough schedule, but I'm also very excited about it. I'm excited about it because of the kind of football fan I am. Again, this is what I was talking about earlier. Like, yes, Georgia has a lot to replace heading into 2024, but that's the sort of thing that makes college football awesome. Because, again, I'm rooting for my team, the Power G, the guys in the silver breeches, okay? And one of the reasons I prefer college football over the NFL is because I don't get hung up on players. I mean, I have my favorite players, of course, but I know that there's going to be turnover, and this year is no different than any other. But when you look at a schedule like this, it sort of cranks it up a little bit as far as, you know, whether you want to call it the excitement or the anxiety, depending on how you fall on the spectrum. Like, there's certainly going to be a lot that's going to keep you interested here. And if you are of the faint of heart, this schedule probably is going to have you pushed to the edge, because there's going to be a lot of young faces out there playing for the Dogs early on, and they're going to have to sort some stuff out by the time they get into Alabama. But by that time, they're going to know a little bit about themselves. And we certainly are going to know where they stand once they get through the month of October. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot that you can pick apart here, but I know that I am looking forward to it. I'm feeling pretty good about it, and I'm excited about what 2024 is going to bring us. So before we move on to other business, as it were, let's take an opportunity here just to remind you guys that if you enjoy being here, if you like what we're doing, please check out the opportunities to subscribe to the channel. And if you're so interested, become a member of the channel. And you can see here at the top, there's a nice join button right there. And if you scroll on down, take a look, you can see where our other channel members are displayed. If you want to know what it's like being a member of the channel, check them out. Ask them a question. They'll shoot you straight, I'm sure. But we're doing the best we can to give you guys some good Georgia Bulldogs content here all the time. And if you choose to support the channel in that way, it would be very, very, very appreciated. I don't know how many times I can say very and make it sound normal, but I would say it continuously if I could. So that's it. That's our look at the 2023 season. It was a wonderful year for the Dogs. Yet another season of undefeated in SEC regular season play. The only SEC team to ever go 8-0 3 consecutive years. So in one more instance, the Dogs are 1 of 1. And there are just numbers. I've got them off right here. I could just rattle them off to you. And there were a lot of streaks that ended this year too with the loss on Saturday. But there's so many that we can point to and say those were historic moments for this Georgia Bulldog team. And the one that I always want to bring back and remind people is that this Georgia Bulldogs senior class went 22-0 in Athens, undefeated at home. So if you had a chance to get between the hedges and watch these guys play live, just know that you were part of a historical run. And it's one that is going to be hard-pressed to ever be seen again. especially with the way that schedules are going and everything else that's happening in college football right now. These are certainly the kind of seasons that we hope for, but we cannot expect. That's not fair to the players. And frankly, I think you're probably shorting yourself as a fan if you put yourself in that boat, because once you get to the point where nothing is good except for a national championship, and that's not the same thing as saying that you don't expect your team to compete for a national championship. That's different. But saying if we don't win the national championship, everything is a waste and a bust, well, you're just pigeonholing yourself into a position that sucks the joy out of being a college football fan, at least in my perspective. So 2023, we're almost putting it in the rearview mirror. Like I say, National Signing Day is coming up. The transfer portal is hopping right now. So we've already had like 8 Bulldogs decide that they want to jump in there and try their hand somewhere else. That's fine. Best of luck to all of those players. But I'm certain that we're going to see some new Bulldogs come into the fold here via the transfer portal soon enough. As I said, National Signing Day is coming up. So we all know that Georgia has a good class right there, and it's going to be interesting to see how many of those kids are actually able to come in as mid-year players and be a part of these bowl practices to get ready for spring practice and then ultimately 2024, where they're going to be counted on to contribute to the effort, be it on special teams or in some other position, just providing depth or whatever it might turn out to be. So there's a lot to pay attention to, and we are going to do our best to help you make sense of it all as we move through all of this stuff. So I'm glad you're here with me. Just don't ever let this season be tarnished, is what I would leave you with. I would say just remember just how fantastic of a run this has been and enjoy what's in front of us, because I promise you, Georgia's not going anywhere anytime soon, and there are going to be more championships in the Bulldogs' future as we move into 2024 and beyond. And today, seeing that 2024 schedule, we know that there are going to be some really exciting games coming up. If you travel, if you have season tickets and you try to go to these games, there are going to be a lot of fun venues to visit. I mean, everything that makes college football great is now going to be in front of you starting here in 2024 with these expanded travel patterns and these bigger games, these more marquee games, more regularly on the schedule. So there's just so much to look forward to. I know you are as excited as I am, and I certainly appreciate you being here with me. And until next time, go Dogs!
Told them, how about them fucking dogs? That's what I told them.